Welcome to Fantasy Island. I'm your host, Mr. Rourke. Whoops, wrong show. This is PlanStrongerTV, and I'm your host, David Holland. On today's program, I'm going to share with you the 5 things my clients have never said to me. You may or may not be surprised, but it's no fantasy. You'll definitely find the answers interesting and helpful. Let's roll. And welcome back to an unplugged edition of PlanStrongerTV. So, the 5 things that my clients have never said to me. I've worked with a lot of people over the last 20 some odd years, helping them with their finances. And what's interesting to me is that there's a pattern, or there are some things that I see on a regular basis. And so I thought it'd be interesting to kind of frame this up for you as the 5 things that people have never said. Of course, there's a lot of things they've never said, but these are interesting, and I want to dig into this because I think you'll find it helpful, and also give you a little different perspective on how to view maybe your planning with your investments and for retirement. So let's dig in. So first, number 1, the plan's too personalized. I've never had somebody say that to me. Everybody, all of us want a personal experience, a personalized, customized, determined plan for our situation, whether it's a financial plan for your finances or whether it's, picking out a new tie. So we all want that personal experience. I've never had somebody say, whoa, David, you're doing too much personalization. Now, here's the catch. That takes time. That takes time. It takes getting documents together. It takes answering questions. So I've had people, as I'm going through the financial planning process with them, say, wow, you want a lot of information. Yes, because my advice is only as good as the understanding I have about the client. Imagine that. So, it would be like, again, I'll use the analogy of buying a tie. If I go to the store and say, give me a tie, they say, well, what kind do you want? Let's talk about what you're going to wear. No, I don't have time for that. Just give me a tie. Well, am I going to get the tie that's probably going to be the right fit for me? It'd be just chance, right? So personalization takes time. It takes information. It takes multiple meetings. We're not selling mufflers. It's not like you go to the counter and here's your plan, here's your muffler. It is personalized. And there is a lot more than just providing information. It's not just saying, here's my investment statement, here's my Social Security. It's listening. And this is where, again, we've heard about robots and computers helping in the financial planning process, and maybe someday they take over. No time soon, because it's the listening and understanding the client situation that allows me to make good recommendations. And this is the hallmark. This is the standard for any good financial planner, if you ask me, of being able to provide great advice to a client is that the plan is personalized. All right, so that's number 1 in my book, is it has to be personalized, and it's going to take some time. Number 2, things that my clients have never said. Ready? Diversified too much. David, you diversified my investments way too much. Never said that. They might not fully understand at first why we're doing some of the things we're doing, but I've never had somebody look back and say, golly, look at this. You put my money into too many different things. The challenge or the problem, I guess it's symptomatic a little bit with some parts of the financial industry, is that there's a tendency to find a solution, especially if that's all the financial person does, if that's kind of their thing, and that everybody gets the same thing. Well, I really am concerned and struggle with that concept. I think that everybody's situation, just as planning takes time, there needs to be diversification. So nobody's ever said that because I help them understand the importance of diversification. We don't go all in on any one thing. I don't like to see 10% of anybody's money in any one thing that can go down in value. I mean, you know, you don't want to place large bets on, you know, specific things that may not pan out. And if I have my way, I don't want to see more than 1% with any one individual stock. I know that seems like I'm taking it a little far, but, you know, there's 20,000 ex-Enron employees who would tell you, diversify. Don't put all your money into one company, even if you work for them. So diversification is critical because things will happen. The other thing about that is that you want to have multiple accounts to pull on. You want to have different places you can go to get money. And if you have it all in one thing, that may create some challenges. So you want to be diversified and have flexibility. Next is too much predictability. I've never had a client say to me, you know what, David, you made my financial plan or my income I'm going to get in the future just too darn predictable. You've given me too much understanding and comfort about what's going to play out. Now, prior performance isn't indicative of future results, right? You've heard that from the financial world for as long as you've understood what finances are. But creating predictability, or let me say it another way, reducing uncertainty where we can is, again, part of the job of a financial planner. That's part of what we do. So especially when we start talking about income in retirement, we want to make that as reliable and predictable as we can. You know, when you're accumulating money for retirement, a lot of the emphasis is on what? Return on investment, ROI. How much return can I get on the money I put into that account? But when you get to retirement and you leave the certainty or the more predictable nature of that paycheck, and you go to being reliant on the income from your portfolio, now ROI becomes reliability of income. Okay, so creating predictability. How do you do that? Well, you don't draw your income, or at least not all of it. You can take some, but you don't draw all of it from something that is fluctuating in value, because the risk there is that you're going to run out. It's that you're going to draw against that account when it's down in value. We don't want that. We want to draw from things that are more secure, that are more fixed in nature. There are a variety of different investments you can use to do this, but when we go into that reliance phase, okay, of relying on the investments, then we need that predictability, much more so than we need while we're accumulating and putting the money away. Now, two final things that clients have never said to me, and I want to go to these. Too much liquidity. David, you kept me too liquid. You prepared me too much for what might come down the road or be a surprise. Guilty. You cannot have too much liquidity. I'm a big fan of keeping a significant portion of your investments liquid. So what does that look like? What does that sound like when you are ready to use that money in retirement? You know, when you get to retirement, what you've got is what you've got. Now, a lot of people are working part-time. Some people, their spouse works while they retire. Maybe they have this, you know, staggered retirement. But for a lot of people, when they retire, what they've got is what they've got, and they're going to be relying on it along with other sources of income like Social Security and maybe a pension. Well, if you have an emergency, you need to know you can get to money. Same is true while you're still working, but especially true once you retire. So what does that look like? Well, I like the idea of keeping roughly, and this is just a general starting point, but roughly 50% of somebody's investments liquid. You say, well, if it's liquid, how can it be working for me? Are you saying put it all in the money market? No. I like the idea of some money being in a liquid emergency cash account at the bank. I like that. Then there's different, you know, ways to calculate how much that should be. But the emergency fund is important. But then behind that, kind of have a backup emergency account, should be some other money that you've already paid tax on, maybe something that is invested in a brokerage account, and that money still can work, but it acts as a backup emergency account for your regular emergency fund. Why is that important? Things happen. If you use up all that emergency fund, you don't want to have to then go to something where you're going to have to pay a lot of taxes, or go to something that's going to cost you significantly to get out of it, where it's got a surrender charge or you're breaking a contract, so there's a cost there. Now, if you have to get to those other accounts later because the emergency or the demand for cash is so great that you run through your emergency fund, you run through that backup investment account, then you have to go to the other accounts. Okay, well then at that point, incurring some costs for getting the liquidity on that money, that just may be a reality of what it is because it's so unexpected. We should never have to incur big surrender or big transaction or liquidation costs in order for our financial plan to play out. In other words, that should be anticipated with how we invest the money. So the other thing I like, of course, while we're talking about liquidity and being able to get to money, is also having some backup with a line of credit, a home equity line of credit, or an executive line of credit where it's like a signature line of credit, or even a reverse mortgage line of credit. Have some sort of backup line of credit. I don't care if it's a credit card that you can get money on if you need to. Have various different ways of accessing money in the event of a cash crunch, because if you don't have those things, then you'll have to do something drastic and probably at not a good deal or good terms to get that money. Now, number 5. Clients have never told me this one. Too much focus on costs. David, you've put way too much emphasis on the long-term cost of investing. Guilty again. I think that when you look at how you build a financial plan and how it works over time, we can't ignore cost. There are costs associated with investing. So we've got to make sure that whatever we're doing is that we've considered the cost, because over time, it really can add up. So are we paying too much for those investments? How do you know? These are things we have to check and double check and maybe get a second opinion on to make sure we're not spending any more than we have to. Everything that is worthwhile has a cost. You're going to pay for what you get, but you might not get what you pay for, as the expression goes, right? So you will definitely pay for what you do get. Quality costs. Nothing's free. The costs are either obvious and easy to see, or let me rephrase that. They're easy to disclose if the effort's made by the advisor or however you're doing it. But some costs are harder to find, or maybe they're just built into the product. Nothing's free. You just want to understand how this works. So when you think about looking at planning and how you structure your investments, I've seen people overlook some of these basic concepts. And maybe they just seem basic to me because I've done this work as long as I have. But as you plan this out and you think about what you're trying to do, there are some recurring subjects I've seen that can trip people up. You need to have liquidity. You've got to focus on cost. You want to make sure that when it's time for drawing on income in retirement, that a good chunk of your money that you're going to get is predictable. Golly, diversification. There are in the financial world, there are some parts of the financial community that say, well, you could be too diversified. Show me that. I don't think so. Yeah, you could put all your money into maybe too many index funds, and it's like it all gets washed out, and you end up just having the entire stock investing universe. Well, you know what? I'd rather you have that than to have all your money in one stock because you think it's a great company, you heard it's a good company, you work for the company. Again, remember my example of the 20,000 ex-Enron employees, okay? It's the people that get hurt are the ones that have put too much into one thing. They've lowered their guard and they've made a decision to do something that is outside of or beyond what they're normally comfortable with, maybe for emotional reasons. Maybe they've decided to invest in something that they said, well, I guess it's okay because the guy that's at my church, he said I should do it. He's an advisor and I see him up at the communion rail. He looks like an okay guy. It's those scenarios where people get hurt. If you stick to these basic ideas of being diversified, of creating a financial plan that you can know where you're headed, when you put those things together, you're not going to have a lot of complaints, okay? So that's why I thought it would be a good way of sharing this with you, the 5 things that my clients have never told me. The truth is, there's lots more. I'm just scratching the surface. So when you are thinking about your financial future, when you're thinking about where you're going to be 5 and 10 years down the road, whether you're approaching retirement or you're already in retirement, it's a little bit of a cliche, but it's never too late to do the right thing with your money. If some of these things I'm sharing with you give you pause, make you stop and say, well, you know what? Maybe I'm not diversified enough. I don't know. It looks like I've got most of my money in this one mutual fund that the financial advisor recommended I put my money in. I saw somebody just the other day that had 40%, it was a lot of money, 40% of their money in one investment fund. They'd come into me for a second opinion, and I was analyzing what they had. And so when I dug into it, 40% was in the one fund. The fund was costing them almost 4% a year in fees, and we checked the rating, and the rating was not very high. So it pays to check, but it pays to make sure that you understand what you have. So these things happen. And what I'm describing to you is not a scam. It's just maybe just a little bit of lack of effort or not enough attention to what's being done. And if you're going to do it yourself, that's your job. That's your responsibility. If you're working with an advisor, that's their job. So you want to make sure these things are being done correctly so that you aren't having a situation where you're going, golly, if only I had. Okay? That's my 5 things that my clients have never told me over the years. I hope that's helpful to you. Okay, it's time for the favorite part of the program for me, which is the viewer questions. Now remember, if you have a question, please send it to me and I'll be happy to answer it on the program. And as always, I will change the information enough so that somebody that knows you doesn't know that I'm talking about you or about your situation. So let me dive in. This question comes from Phil, and Phil asked me, what's the best type of credit card to have if you want to work on maintaining good financial accountability between spouses? Boy, I love that. I ended up meeting and talking with Phil and with his wife, and they had been dealing with some issues of, accountability and trust and how they would handle working through some debt they had accumulated. And so I met with Phil and his wife, and we talked through it, and as is often the case, it's not really about the money. When I see situations where there's a breakdown between couples about their finances, very often it's really not about the money itself. It's something else going on in the relationship. So when we talked about it, we figured out a basic plan and approach going forward of how they would work through and pay off the debt. Then on the back end, this question came of, all right, well, we've got this plan to work through the debt, but going forward, how do we have the right kind of credit card or the right kind of way of purchasing things that will allow us to have accountability and not get back in the same place we were that brought them in to meet with me to begin with? So the question is about, do we use a credit card, which of course with a credit card you can purchase things and don't have to pay the full amount in, depending on the credit card, but most cards allow you to have what's called revolving credit, where you don't have to make the full payment, you've got to make a partial payment, and that can then allow you to build up a debt, which is what happened in this particular case. Or you can use a credit card that's still a credit card, but doesn't require you to make the full payment and allows you to defer it. But when you do that, there could be serious consequences as it relates to the expenses and other factors. Other cards, you can borrow it as much as you want, and then you have to pay it all back the next month. So it doesn't have a limit per se. And then the other option, which is what Phil was asking me about, is how about a debit card? Well, with a debit card, you only have what's in your account. A debit card, it's deducted, the charge is deducted directly from your bank account. So for Phil and his wife, based on their discussion with me about their situation, I recommended the debit card because what had happened is there had been this debt that got racked up unbeknownst to the other spouse. So with a debit card, only so much in the account. So the damage can only be so much. So if you're going to use a debit card, perhaps that should be your joint account, and it should be a certain amount of money that is kept in that account and that account only. That also helps with protecting your money from being scammed or, somebody being able to run up credit and having to deal with the issues of a fraud alert and all that, which happens on a regular basis. It's out there. But be sure to look at the different types of cards and evaluate them for your specific situation, especially when there is this issue. And again, get to the heart of the issue. As my friend Peggy Burdick says, she says it's always about the money even when it's not. And I think that is so true when we come to this area. Thanks for listening. Before you go, it's been said that if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Now, some people say, well, David, you're a financial planner. You plan everything, right? No, of course not. I have at least a couple hours of chaos scheduled every few weeks. No, you don't have to plan your whole life, but boy, what an advantage when you can plan ahead and know as a general idea where you're going and you take specific steps to get where you want to be. Now, when you think about how that plays out over time, one thing I know for certain from doing this work for my clients is that things will change. Absolutely. It's also been said the only certain thing is change. It is very true, especially when it comes to your finances. Financial planning should not be carved in stone. It should be carved in Jell-O. And things will change. I've had situations with clients where we've had a variety of things that have required us to go back to the financial plan and redo it or update it. So we don't want a plan that is so rigid, inflexible, that we can't adapt to what's coming down the road. It's vital. So there are things that will come. There is divorce. There is the passing of one of the spouses. There are needs that kids may have. There is a downsizing of homes, buying a second home, selling that rental property, a whole host of things that may cause you to need to make changes to your plan. So I encourage you to remain flexible, make sure your plan's flexible, make sure that whoever's helping you is okay with making changes because there's going to be things that come. And if you're not in a position to make those changes, then it will require a much larger reset of your overall plan. And that tends to be expensive and also can be very stressful. So,
this is your 2-minute warning.
There's our 2-minute warning. So, final thought for you today. Don't let the stock market determine your risk tolerance. You determine, and get some help if you need to, from a financial planner, what your risk tolerance should be. What should you be investing in and how you should be doing that? What types of investments should you be going into to achieve your goals? Don't let the stock market, good news or bad news, affect how much risk you take. Back in the late 90s, when we had a very strong bull market run, for a lot of people, caution was thrown to the wind. Pundits on TV, I remember so well, they would dismiss the idea of diversification. And I remember one in particular saying, why bother with asset allocation? Just put all your money into technology stocks. Asset allocation's dead. Yeah, and then 2000, 2001, and 2002 hit. And a cumulative 50% drop in the market. No, asset allocation is not dead. It's alive and well, and those that stuck with asset allocation, kept their money diversified in more than one category of investing, did a lot better than those who had loaded up all their money in technology. Don't let what's happening in the market dictate. You dictate. And the money that's in the market, you need to know that it can stay there for a while, because when you invest, you have to not just party like it's 1999, but invest like it's 1999, and know that 2000, 2001, and 2002 can recur, and that can be the next couple of years. So wherever we are, always have your plan so that some money is, yes, working in the market if that's appropriate for you, but you're not betting everything on things continuing to go as they have been. If you do that, I promise you, you'll plan stronger.
If you would like more information about the topics and our guests featured in this series, please visit our website at PlanStrongerTV.com. Also, if you have a question you would like David to answer, please send it to questions@PlanStrongerTV.com.